Week 1 is in the books. Everybody is overreacting, which means there are great places for us to take advantage on the waiver wire, pick our spots, and absolutely dominate getting the massive breakout potential guys while everybody else is sitting on their hands and sleeping. And that is exactly what I'm going to be giving you guys in this video, as well as a quick list of waiver wire defenses we can stream to make your Week 2 matchup that much easier. But before we get into it, please go ahead and hit that like button. We have the like goal right here. I would appreciate it. It means a ton to me as a creator, but I don't like to waste time. The number one pickup for Week 2 is going to be Alexander Mattison. And we look at the fantasy points and it tells a pretty good story. We have Alexander Mattison scoring 16 with Zamir White scoring 5. Now it is a little bit more than that. Alexander Mattison gets 9 out of 9 snaps on third down, 10 out of the 11 snaps in the 2-minute drill, which 100% guarantees his role in the receiving game all season long. And for the Zamir White owners, I am sorry for you. We expected him to not be a receiving back, not get a ton of usage, be touchdown dependent, but I didn't really expect it to be this bad with Alexander Mattison being in the mix. Now, to be transparent, we most likely, or at least I hope not, we won't be starting Alexander Mattison on a week-to-week basis. He did outperform Zamir White in snaps, 36 compared to his 23. That's a pretty big discrepancy there. But again, back to those numbers we were talking about, he owns the receiving role. And if you're going to be in a Raiders offense that is not good, not great, the receiving role is going to be what you want, because Zamir White is going to be a touchdown dependent running back like we expected. And from week 1, it looks like Alexander Mattison is going to be that running back that we want, especially if the Raiders are down in games, which they are projected to be in almost all of them. Despite looking at the discrepancies in carries, you see Zamir White obviously had a lot more, but they weren't really valuable touches. Alexander Mattison is a great running back pick for the waiver wire for week 1, but there's a lot more absolutely insane waiver wire pickups for week 1. The second guy on this list is J.K. Dobbins, but I'm not going to take my victory lap on this one yet. We can't do that in week 1, but also J.K. Dobbins does have injury history, and while he is on the field and he is here with us, he's an amazing waiver wire ad. You need to be getting him, probably the number 1 pick. As long as his leg stays intact this season, especially if you're short at the running back position already, please go ahead and pick him up. You look at his usage from last game: 10 carries, 153 yards, 3 targets, 3 receptions, 1 touchdown, a 60-yard run. He looked great. He looked efficient, and he did have 22 fantasy points compared to Gus Edwards, barely at anything. Now, you have to take this at a week-to-week level. We still have to see what's going on in this backfield, because he did have some good fantasy numbers. He had a touchdown. Obviously, that's going to inflate his numbers. But fantasy football is about staying 1 week ahead, which is exactly why we had J.K. Dobbins in the video last week. Again, if you guys want to be around for all of these videos, hit that subscribe button. It takes 2 seconds. I would appreciate it a ton. But let's look at the usage and the time on field, because that's really what matters. J.K. Dobbins had 33 snaps compared to Gus Edwards at 24. That's not that crazy of a difference. But then we dive deeper into the actual important snaps. J.K. Dobbins saw 11 snaps compared to Gus Edwards at 2 in the third down role, and he saw 100% of the snaps in the short yardage. So from all of these numbers, it looks like J.K. Dobbins is going to operate as the 60-40 back. That number might even get bigger for J.K. Dobbins as the season goes on if he can stay healthy, but he is the primary receiving back, which is a very, very good sign. And the offensive line isn't terrible. So if he can stay healthy, he's going to be a perfectly fine fantasy value. And if you got him in the last round of your fantasy football drafts, you are very happy right now, but it is not too late to get him off the waivers. Go check if he's still there for you. He's probably my number 1 RB pickup. But if you can't get your hands on either of those guys, the number 3 running back I am loving to pick up, and again, we have been on earlier, but it might be a little bit more dire now with some injury concerns, it's going to be Zach Charbonnet. This week has proven to us that he is 100% a top 3 handcuff running back in fantasy football. We look at the Seahawks game. Kenneth Walker absolutely crushed. He dominated in everything: receiving work, goal line work, time on field. Now, obviously, the numbers were a little bit screwed at the end of that game because Kenneth Walker did leave early in the 4th with an injury to his abdominal. We don't really know what it is yet, or at least at the time of this recording, so make sure to monitor that. Again, I will be recording and posting videos all throughout this week, so we will get more information through these videos. We don't know how serious it is at the time of this recording, and if he does happen to miss 1 game, Zach Charbonnet is going to be a plug-and-play instant. Like, you're going to want him on your roster. Charbonnet doesn't have a ton of standalone value because we saw how much of a workhorse Kenneth Walker was, but if he deals with this injury throughout the year and they kind of restrict him because of that, Zach Charbonnet is going to be a great fantasy ad. Again, he's more of a handcuff, not a standalone guy. But the player profile himself, he is a good running back. He catches passes. He was a workhorse running back in UCLA in his last year. He had more targets than DK did, more receptions, more yards. Now, that doesn't really mean anything because PS2 was locking up DK. But he can catch the ball. He's big enough to have a 3-down workload. He's been drafted in the 2nd round. The draft capital is there. Like, he'll be a perfectly fine RB2 or RB1 if Kenneth Walker misses. But moving into a quarterback, a guy that a lot of people are going to be talking about, and I kind of want to tamper our expectations about, but still is a pretty decent ad, is Baker Mayfield. And the main reason for this, he put up, almost 30 fantasy points, 4 touchdowns, almost 300 yards. We have to understand that every single year, I don't know why this is a thing, but whoever plays the Commanders in week 1, the quarterback is blown out of the water for hype, and it is absolutely crazy, and we're acting like the Commanders defense is good. The Commanders defense was the worst in the entire NFL in fantasy points allowed to the wide receivers, to the quarterbacks, not to the running backs, because the Broncos let up 70 to the Dolphins. The moral of the story is their secondary is absolutely certified garbage. And we see that when you have Baker Mayfield, with Chris Godwin, with Mike Evans, with Rashad White. They all ate. But with that being said, Baker Mayfield did show promise, and he's going to be a perfectly fine fill-in quarterback every single week. Are we going to be starting him? I hope not. But again, if you have a guy like Jordan Love or another quarterback that's not good or got injured, he's a perfectly fine waiver ad, and I have no problem picking him up. He's a good quarterback. He has potential with his receiving weapons, obviously. Just don't take this Commanders matchup too far for what it was. But next up, a running back we need to claim as soon as possible, and I will go through it relatively quick because this did happen on Thursday, and we all know this by now. It is Justice Hill. But let me dive into the snap percentage and actual numbers so you guys can get value from this. He beat Derrick Henry in snaps, 43 compared to his 37. Now, it's, again, not a crazy number, but he led Derrick Henry. He ran 28 routes out of the backfield compared to Derrick Henry at 15, and he had 6 targets. Now, we look at this. We can't overreact. The Ravens were off their game script pretty much the whole time. They were playing behind in this game. Typically, that isn't going to happen for the Ravens, but you can believe that if the Ravens are playing from behind, we saw Justice Hill is going to be used. He's the main receiving back. We kind of knew this was going to happen. I would be lying to you if I said I knew it was going to be this big of a difference between the two and they were splitting this much time. But Derrick Henry is 30 years old. I wouldn't be surprised, again, if they start restricting him later down the line of the season once they have a playoff spot locked up. They don't need to risk him of injury. So that could make the case for Justice Hill. Again, we want to be rostering him in the PPR leagues. He has upside. Probably not startable enough unless Derrick Henry gets injured, but he's not going to have a ton of inherent first week value. Just keep that in mind. So this is a position where if you had a Jordan Love and he got injured, make your number 1 waiver claim on a Baker Mayfield because everybody and their mother is going to be going for Justice Hill. Keeping it on some running backs you will want to roster but may not have the most inherent value this week coming up in week 2. It's Tank Bigsby, and this guy led the Jaguars in rushing yards, which is absolutely insane. It looks like the hype that we were seeing and hoping for Tank last year came through this year. But if we look at the split, it's not all bad for Travis Etienne for the owners that do have him. He saw 100% of the 2-minute drill work. He saw the 1 goal line snap that they did have, and he played on 90% of the third down. So he's getting pretty much all of the valuable touches, but there's nothing saying that won't change. Bigsby still saw 13 snaps in the early downs compared to Etienne at 21. That's a lot closer of a difference, but 17 total snaps compared to Etienne's 36. So Tank Bigsby isn't necessarily a run for the money for Travis Etienne yet, but the fact that he saw this much work in week 1 definitely gets my mind turning on what they might have in mind here for the later half of the season. Again, if Travis Etienne were to get injured, which isn't crazy to say. Again, you can't play fantasy football based on projecting injuries, but if he does, Tank Bigsby is going to be an RB1 pretty much every week, and you're going to want to pick him up. This offense is pretty decent enough to support him. But again, I'd way rather be rostering him over a guy like Tyrone Tracy, a guy like Cole Kmet, even Samaje Perine. I do have a video coming out tomorrow about the traps on the waiver wire in fantasy football you do not want to be picking up because it'll waste your chance at picking up real breakout guys, and week 1, 2, and 3 is the most important and volatile time to pick up breakout players, so you don't want to mess that up. Again, be subscribed so you don't miss that. I'd love to see you in that video. But if you're dealing with tight end trouble like a lot of people are, maybe you have a Jake Ferguson, a David Njoku, go out and get Colby Parkinson. And you got to realize that half of the waiver wire battle isn't just picking up the best players available. You have to fight against the waiver wire priority, against people that have more fab than you. So while everybody's spending 40% of their fab or their number 1 waiver priority on a guy like Isaiah Likely, if you don't want to spend that or you don't have that priority, go get Colby Parkinson, who's not going to be sought after. He's available in 90% of leagues. And now we have Puka Nacua, unfortunately, going through some kind of injury. Now, at the time of this recording, I don't know all of the reports. They're not out yet, but it is the same knee that he was dealing with issues in the preseason. That does kind of scare me if it's the same knee issue coming back up again. He could miss this next week too. Again, I will be monitoring that all throughout this week, so if you want to stay knowledgeable on that, make sure to be subscribed and watch these videos. But that means Colby Parkinson is put into this number 2 spot in the receiving depth chart. Again, he's a tight end, he's not a receiver, but only behind Cooper Kupp. There's nobody else really if there's no Puka. And that's coming into a week 2 matchup against the Arizona Cardinals, who are absolute garbage. Certified booty cheeks against tight ends in fantasy football points allowed. Pretty much every position in fantasy football they're bad at. So Colby Parkinson could very well be a confident start this week, especially if there's no Puka Nacua. Now, even if Puka is healthy, Parkinson's still going to be a decent ad if you need a tight end. But even with him in this game for about half of it, he saw 5 targets for 47 yards. That's about more than all of the top tier tight ends that did not perform this week. So it really can't be that bad of a situation. And we also look at Tyler Higbee. He's on the PUP list. He's still recovering from the ACL tear from the back half of last season. he's not going to be good to go for at least the first 4 weeks of the season. I think it's going to be a lot longer than that until he actually comes back. They have their bye week in week 5. It could be week 6 or 7 until he actually shows his face on the field. And even then, it's going to take some time for him to actually get his full workload, if he even gets that. Because if Colby Parkinson continues to look good, they signed him over the offseason for a reason, there's a very real chance that Higbee just never comes back and gets a significant amount of usage. It's all shaping up for Colby Parkinson to be a very viable tight end option if you don't have one and you don't have one you love on your roster. But time for probably my favorite part of these waiver wire videos is the defenses. I love streaming defenses. If you didn't take huge capital on the Cowboys defense, streaming defenses is the way to go. They statistically rank top 5 compared to just sticking with the top defense every week. It's a great idea. Anyways, besides that, the defense we want to be getting this week, there's a couple. Number 1 is the Chargers. They play the Panthers. They're pretty much a JV team. They have shown nothing outside of not being good. The Chargers put up 15 fantasy points against the Raiders this week, and the Panthers are honestly a worse team than that. They're only rostered in 8% of fantasy football leagues, so it should be pretty much free for you to go get them, and I do have them projected for just shy of 9 fantasy points. That is a very good number. Go ahead and pick them up. But I would love if we can go out and get the Seahawks defense as well. This might be a little bit tougher because they are rostered in 50% of leagues. A lot of people pick them up because of the Broncos matchup this week in week 1, or I guess that's last week now. But they get another amazing matchup against the Patriots. And if you see a theme here, you want to be targeting decent defenses on their own that are playing terrible offenses. It's a great strategy. And outside of Ramondre Stevenson, the Patriots pretty much are absolute booty cheeks. They did not do anything. They're not great. They don't look good. They can't move the ball downfield. I have this defense projected for 8.7 fantasy points. Again, pretty good. You should be able to get them off waivers. But I would consider grabbing the Texans defense as well. Now, Caleb Williams, a fine quarterback. He had 93 yards. Okay, he had some mistakes. It's fine. The real issue is the Bears' offensive line. The interior offensive line is so bad. We saw that last week against the Titans, and that gives a lot of sack opportunities for this defense that is very, very good. The Texans' defense in general has a lot of young talent and actual good players. They're not just relying on the matchup, and they have a defensive-minded head coach. It's a great situation. They're only rostered in 29% of leagues. Go pick them up. A high upside, high floor defense as well. Streamable defenses for week 2 here is a little bit scarce, so those are my top 3. I appreciate you guys watching this video all the way through, and I would love to see you guys in the waiver wire trap video coming tomorrow.